Welcome back to Tea with the Queens. We have an awesome guest today, Dr. Christine Gibson, okay? And she's a doctor, a family doctor, and she's also a trauma therapist. So she's going to be sharing some great things with us today, and we're going to get right into the conversation, and we're going to get to know who she is, what she does, and how she can pour into us at Tea with the Queens, where we talk about the transformation, and we encourage the empowerment, and we also encourage acquiring those skills so we can apply them to our lives, our personal lives, and our business. So I'm going to bring up Dr. Christine, and she can let us know more about her, and we can welcome her. Hello.
Well, hello there. It's nice to be here.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us today and being a part of Tea with the Queens.
I love this. The tea, the queens, it's all the right vibe.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I love that. I love the tea. And when I came with the concept with the tea, I'm thinking transformation. And I know that on your speaker sheet, your bio, you talk about your love transformation, and then empowerment. So this was a good fit. So we could talk about that. But now we want to see and hear from Dr. Christine to see who is Dr. Christine Gibson.
So I was a family doctor for a really long time. I worked in a hospital for 16 years, and then I moved into community and I had a family practice. And then what happened is I got caught in the earthquakes in Nepal in 2015. And I had a little bit of PTSD symptoms. And the more that I started studying trauma, the more that I realized all of my patients had trauma. I worked in equity deserving communities, I work in refugee health, and I had no idea what to do about it. So I started studying, well, what do you do about trauma? And that's what I do now. I'm a trauma therapist. I still do a bit of family practice, but um I was really excited at the prospect to help people work through trauma.
Yes. And trauma comes in so many different forms. And a lot of people don't even realize when they've been in trauma. Trauma can come from loss. It can come from loss of job, relationships. It can, like I was in a trauma situation when I was 16, and to this day it still affects me. It crowds. I was at it. My family, we went to the beach for an event, and it was so much fun. We get ready to leave, and a fight broke out, and it affected so many people. So now when I'm around crowds, I freak out. And if I go to a concert, and if it's crowded, I'd rather stand by the door and enjoy the concert than being in the midst because of that trauma. And like you said, when you've been traumatized, we don't really understand, or we don't really take heed to the fact that things that traumatize us, this is a real thing. And it's good to be able to identify that and get the support that we need. So that's great. So, what made you think about going in the first place? What made you think about being a family doctor? What was the inspiration behind that?
It's interesting. When I was in medical school, I was really ready to be a pediatric neurologist. And I loved working with kids and I loved how the brain works. But when I started doing all of my rotations through all the different subjects, I loved everything. I have such a huge curiosity to learn and to explore things. So family medicine was a good fit for me because you get to deal with everything. I can do mental health, I can do surgical assists, I can do hospital work. You can do almost anything from family medicine. And I've done a lot of overseas work as well, which
Okay.
needs lots of primary care docs. So it's been a really interesting career to have many different paths, and I've explored lots of them within there. So it was a perfect fit for me.
And how long did you practice?
Well, I still practice and I still do some
Oh,
family.
that's right. Yeah, just a little.
Yeah. So 20, I guess 23 years I've been a family doctor now.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
remarkable. And the energy it takes to the discipline. So I might, I give you your credit and everything, because that's not easy. And then what I found out, when you specialize in a specific area, That's all you do. But when you're a family doctor and you have a whole wide range of things to do, then there's so many different things you got to learn in order to be able to compensate for all of that. So that's a lot. How long did it take you, as far as school, to finish from, the time that you started in medical school to when you finished? Well, you know what? No, when you first thought about it, from that point until you finished.
Well, and it's different for every area. So for us, we have to have an undergrad degree to get into med school, which is different in places like Europe or Britain,
Oh,
Australia.
okay.
They can go straight into medical school. So
Okay.
we have to have an undergrad degree first. So we did 4 years undergrad, 4 years med school. And then family practice in Canada is only 2 years, but in the
Oh,
States, it's three, and they're going to say four soon, actually. And I've worked in some countries, like in Tanzania, they were running a 5 year residency because
wow.
their family doctors have to learn how to do surgery because they'll often be the only doctor available for, millions of people in a rural area. So,
Yeah.
it is different everywhere. So for me, it was about um, 10 years, but I know others have spent a lot more time. And then because I'm such a nerd, I took 3 years to do a master's in education, and then I just finished a doctorate. So now I'm
Okay.
doctor. Yeah, I
Congratulations.
know. It's ridiculous. So my doctorate was in transdisciplinary study, which is about learning different things. So it was a good fit because I was a generalist as a doctor, and now as a doctorate, I was looking at the study of many, many different intersecting things, which was really fun. So I love being in school. It's kind of my jam.
Well, look. It shows for being a doctor. Doctor, you don't hear that often. You hear about someone having, went to school for their doctor, a PhD degree or a doctor degree, and then they go and get the honorary doctorate, and then it's like then they become doctor. But to work on two doctorates at the same time is remarkable. And I wouldn't say that that's a bad thing. It's just hey, you're a serial student. You love the
Yeah.
education. So you said you got your bachelor's degree is in teaching first.
No, I did a master's. So
Oh, okay.
my undergrad was just science. I did lots of genetics, some neurology, and then I went to med school. And then probably 8 years later, I did a master's in medical education.
Oh,
I created
okay.
a residency program in health equity. So we had lots of doctors who were working, immigrant and refugee health, overseas work. Uh, they work with indigenous communities, uh, just all kinds of places where they just needed extra skills. So I created that residency program as my master's. And then the doctorate I just finished now. So I did that 20 years after med school. I decided, okay, well, it's time to do another doctorate. So I just finished it a couple of months ago, actually.
Hey, like I said, congratulations. I'm asking a lot of the questions about education because it always fascinates me when you have someone that has such a vast amount of education. You just wonder, man, how long did it take? And, if it's satisfying and it makes you happy and it's taking you places, I say go for it. But I think that is such an amazing thing. So to move past that, but I was being nosy because I'm like, that is remarkable to me. And I find that fascinating for real that someone would take that time and that you have the education that you have and do the things that you've done. So that's impressive to me.
Well, and it takes a lot of privilege. Like if you think of
Yeah.
somebody who can afford to be in school for 10 years, and like for some of those years, I worked part time jobs, but like for medical school, you can't really do that. So
Right.
it takes a lot of, family support and bank loans. And, it's not an easy thing to do. So
Yeah.
while I think it's an interesting path, it's a path that I was really lucky to be able to take because neither of my parents went to university. So for me to be able to do this much school was pretty amazing.
Yeah, that is amazing. So from school to being the family doctor to now getting your second doctorate, now to your business, your brand, what you're doing now. So can you tell us about that?
Well, it's really interesting how it came about. I do a lot of mental health work in my jobs now, mostly dealing with trauma. And like you mentioned, Millicent, about that incident on the beach, but there's so many other kinds of trauma. Like, it would be really rare for a Black person to have a family lineage in America and not inherit some ancestral trauma. And people don't really recognize that we actually carry the legacy of trauma in our DNA. So for me, I studied genetics in my undergrad, and I thought I knew how we handed down our genes to the next generation. And everything that I learned 25 years ago turned out to be wrong, because epigenetics, or how we actually pass down trauma, is not something that I was able to study back then. This is something we've only learned recently. And so I work with lots of people who've been through events like you have, lots of people who just had really challenging childhoods. So their parents were working three jobs and they just were neglected, or there was actual abuse in the home, or their parent went to jail. Um, they watched a parent being harmed by another. There were so many things that can happen in childhood that really affect the way you see yourself and you see the world. And the more that I learned about it, the more that I thought, well, people don't understand how much of this that we carry. And a friend of mine, well, she's kind of like my kid now. Somebody I was mentoring, and now she kind of mentors me too. She's a young person, and she said, you got to get on TikTok.
Yeah.
So in 2021, I joined TikTok as TikTok Trauma Doc, and it kind of blew up. A lot of people were interested in learning more about what is trauma and what can you do about it. And so that led to writing a book, which came out last year, called The Modern Trauma Toolkit. And then I created a company called Safer Spaces Training, where we help companies learn how to create trauma-informed spaces and psychological first aid. So what do you do if someone is really anxious in your office? What do you do if someone's having a panic attack, or if they're shutting down? There's a lot of people who they know they're neurodivergent. Well, how do you accommodate for that in the workplace? So I'm trying to do one-on-one work as a doctor, but I'm also trying to do work that changes systems, because I think it's the systems causing trauma, and I want to get more involved in systems change it for the
Yeah.
second half of my career.
I think that's very important. And when you were saying about childhood trauma, a lot of times people go through things in their childhood, and what you're saying as far as experiencing, so, some of those things, I've seen, and probably a lot of them I've seen, and it was traumatizing. And then when you're growing up and you're becoming into yourself, you don't realize some of the characteristics that you may have, some of the fears or some of the unknown traumas and anxieties you may have. And that's probably why you're so popular on TikTok, because so many of us, speaking of is people, so many of us have been through so much
Yeah.
that we didn't know how to identify with that, and we have all of these different characteristics and traits going on now. So we finally is able to identify and to connect with someone who's given us that information, so that we can now in turn learn more about who we are. And that is something that is missing, especially in the generation. um it wasn't it was kind of frowned upon.
Yeah.
You just dealt with it, you just went with it. If something was going on, it wasn't you didn't seek help, you didn't go get counseling, and you didn't talk about the trauma. It was just you kept it in the house, or you kept it among the family. You didn't let that out, you had to just deal with it. And that shaped us is a community, and it shaped us as a world, full of drama, full of trauma, full of uncertainty, just full of trials and tribulations of things that just because of that. And like you say, even that generational trauma that's passed down to our DNA. So it's like, man, so you look at the whole person who's been through so much, and we're wondering why they're not thriving, or why it's hard for them to thrive. And what you were saying, this is the reason. So what you're doing and what your business is and your brand, it's really, really, really needed, and it's inspiring people, and it's giving us hope. And I'm talking from my own experiences, really, because I never some of the things you just said, I never really considered. I just
I
never
don't
have.
think a lot of people do. I mean, frankly, I didn't. Before I started studying trauma after I was in the earthquakes, I was kind of glossing over, like, as a doctor, that job was traumatic. I would work for 30 straight hours. I would forget to eat. I would forget to, well, I wasn't allowed to sleep. I would forget to pee. And I would just ignore that I had a human body. And then I would deal with death, sickness, death, sickness. And you just kind of have to turn off your emotions, because if you really are feeling what you're feeling with all of these awful things that are happening around you, you would just get overwhelmed and shut right down. So
Yeah.
I had so many things inside me that were trauma responses that I didn't even recognize that that's what they were. So we go into fight and flight, which is what doctors do when we're at the hospital. We just, our pager goes off and we go into flight. Well, what can I do? And how can I help? And you're running and you're running. And I didn't realize that my body was stuck in fight and flight. And so my muscles were always tense. It was, you know, my mind would race at nighttime. There were things I couldn't get out of my brain. I was stuck in fight and flight and I didn't know it. And then what ends up happening when you're stuck there for so long is you go into freeze because your body just gets exhausted and it's like, well, okay, I've had enough now. And then you can't get off the bed and you can't get off the couch. And so many doctors will say, oh, yeah, you're depressed. But that's a possibility. And another possibility is that you've just been through so much trauma and stress, and your body is saying, okay, I'm done now. That was too much.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so
That's the truth. They will go right to that. Oh, depression, and
yeah.
not even considering the fact that okay, there's trauma there. Then you could take the pills and you can go, talk to the doctor, somewhat, because they're only going to listen so long, especially if they're prescribing meds. But you're not dealing with the trauma. You're still, like you said, you're still in that zone. Once the pills kind of die down a little bit, you're right back in that flight. You're right back in that, intensity. So
You've totally nailed it, Millicent. And that's why I wrote the Modern Trauma Toolkit. It was meant for patients. I wrote it at a grade 8 level, really easy to understand, examples that might feel relevant. Because I work with lots of people of color. Like I work in a refugee clinic. So, like, none of my clients are white there. And I'm a white person. So I was trying to figure out, well, how can I tell the story in a way that makes sense to you? And so I ended up hiring a lot of young women of color. One was trans, and we just kept working on the book until it felt like relevant and safe for them to read. So it was really important for me to say, I want this message to come across as saying, there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. And the reason it's putting you in fight and flight or freeze is because it's working so hard to protect you.
yeah,
But here's how you can let your brain know that you're safe now and it doesn't have to work so hard. And I walk them through, like, there's 40 different examples of activities to do. And a lot of this is for free on my TikTok as well. If you go to my TikTok, I'm TikTok Drama Doc, and I have a little file called Healing Skills. And I just teach people all kinds of techniques. A lot of what I do are body based techniques, because once your brain has decided that you're in danger, it actually doesn't let your thinking brain work very well. So all the time I'll work with folks and they'll say, I have no memory. I just can't concentrate on things. And I'll say, yeah, that makes sense, because the part of your brain that's scanning for danger, it's sucking up all of the energy right now. And it's just making you go into fight and flight all the time. Of course, you've got no more energy left for your thinking brain. Let's try something different. So I do lots of ways that they can regulate their nervous system. Super simple stuff to learn. Like, I can teach this stuff to a 6-year-old.
and see, that's what's needed. Like you said, to be able to understand how the brain works. Like you say, even in a simple terms, but to see how for us to be empowered to be able to go and to recharge in a way where we're not just overthinking. We're not, our wheels are not just spinning. And I'll give you a small testimony of myself. I lost my son in 2011 in a car accident. Everybody was just calling and calling and calling, and I wasn't even at home, so I didn't know what was going on. Then social media, of course, was out. So I think a sister or my husband, somebody saw it on Facebook. telling my son to rest in peace. And I was like maybe an hour and 20 minutes away from home. So because of that, and it was in the evening. So now in the evening, when the phone rings or someone's talking to someone, that whole defense comes in. So I'm just like, who is it? And they be like, calm down, calm down. And I'm upset when they say that because I'm like, you all know the trauma behind why I'm so anxious. So don't be so cruel. Y'all know that I'm going to go there. So I've been trying to calm myself, like you say, with using that part of enhancing that part of your brain where that energy to protect yourself is not taking it all. And so I say, when the phone rings, I just kind of sit there, and if no one's reacting and everything, I'm just, keep doing what I'm doing. But it took years. That was in 2011. I'm just now getting to that point, and I really didn't have anybody to tell me about that. You go to your grief counseling, you do, do what you're supposed to do with that, from grief counseling in natural, in a secular sense, and then the Christian counseling, all of that. But this is the first time that I really understood what you were saying about how to deal with that flight and freeze. I was there, and I've been there. So anytime that phone rings at a certain time during the day, that's it for me. And it's how hard and difficult it is to live like that. I've been living, but it's very difficult. So when you're saying, it's like, it's that aha moment. It's like that sunshine that's coming out now. And that's why it's so important, those who are listening, that's why it's so important to understand your trauma, to understand where you are, and to really talk to someone who knows what they're talking about. And who better than Dr. Christine? Thank you for that.
And thank you for sharing that story, Millicent. I'm so sorry that happened. Like, honestly, I believe, having worked with people who've been through horrifying events, there's literally nothing harder a person can go through than losing a child. And I think it changes you. I said to one of my patients recently, it's kind of like you have a hole in your heart now, and you can patch it up, but you'll always have that hole.
Yeah.
It really does change a person. And I don't think of that as a trauma that you can ever really get over, because your whole life is with having lost that person. But you can, like what you're describing about the nighttime and that phone call, I would call that a trigger. So that's something that's going to bring you right back to the memory. And the way that I would describe that is, the past is sneaking into your present. And so the past, when that phone call took place in the evening, that those associations, they're actually stored in your brain that way. And it's really interesting, but you can change those. So as much as you say, I'm nervous in crowds, or when the phone rings at night, these are triggers to take you back into the past. Triggers are something you can actually rewire the brain. And that's one of the messages that I try to share with folks, is because I didn't know this as a doctor, but I've since learned how to do it. You can rewire the brain so that the triggers actually don't trigger you anymore. So there's lots of different therapy techniques. I teach some of them in the book, but obviously you can't rewire trauma on your own.
Yeah.
But for some things, like a person who's afraid of flying, I just did a segment with Time Magazine a couple weeks back about that. So a person who's afraid of flying, you could probably use the techniques in the Modern Trauma Toolkit and change those associations, where one of the things you might do is to notice that your heart's speeding up and your brain is saying, uh-oh, you're getting anxious. And then you just say to your brain, no, 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 it's okay. My heart's speeding up because I'm excited. And that's what we call biofeedback. When you notice the messages that are coming up from your body that your brain is going to interpret as an emotion, you just interpret those messages differently. You change the perception. And there's so many different ways to do it. That one is more like a thinking brain way. But a lot of what I teach in the Modern Trauma Toolkit is, how do you relax your body when your body is trying to make you feel anxious or panicky? What are the different ways that you can bring it back down into the calm nervous system state? And there's so many things you can do. One thing that I always share with folks is that our ancestors actually naturally did it. Most of our ancestors did singing. especially singing in groups, like they would go to a church or they would sing, when they were working. And singing is actually incredible regulating for our nervous system. So the healing doesn't come in a pill. It comes in lots of different forms that our body already knows how to do. Really gentle stroking of the forehead creates calming brain waves. And I find it so amazing because I'll share this with people and they'll say, "That's amazing. I naturally do that." Or "I naturally do that for my kid." Um, and we have all these built in healing mechanisms that our bodies have been conditioned to forget. The reason we used to dance, especially dance in community, was to restore, to release all of the stuck muscle tension. So we don't move our bodies as much as we used
No.
to, and we need to because we
Yeah.
were supposed to do that because our otherwise we just get more and more tense.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And when you had said it was, let me see, it was something that you said. So I hope I didn't lose it. I hope I didn't lose it. When you were saying about our ancestors, how they were naturally able to, deal with these things, because like you said, they were able to. They appreciated their bodies. They appreciated their surroundings. They appreciated the earth. Then that's
Mhm.
my belief. With the even if it was like the natural herbs and the natural teas and things that they made, they was able to deal with things differently. And you said something that was so profound when you said that the healing is not in the pill. It's not in the pill, and we have been giving the gift of of healing within, changing the situations within our own selves, the gifts that's given to us to be able to tap into to make those differences. And that's why you have the followers. That's why they follow you, because a lot of the things that you're saying, you don't hear. You don't hear that. It's like, take this, take that, go here, go that, go there. But the thing is that people are tired because one is side effects. They come to those symptoms eventually come back because the body's now immune to what you're taking, the support that you may need is short lived. They don't have insurance where it says, "Oh well, you've had enough visits. That's it." So it's so
Mm,
many different. Not to take anything away from those things, but
yeah.
to be able to learn the different things that we can now do. Couple with that if you want, but we can now take responsibility for some of the things. Excuse me, that we can do so that we're now healing, and we're, like you say, we're dealing with those triggers, and putting those that to rest, because there's certain things that we probably, like you said, the trauma will always be there. That whole would always be there. The experience will probably always live there, but the triggers, like you said, those things can be dealt with. We can learn how to manage those triggers. We can, we can change that. So that's what we don't hear every day, and that's a blessing. Excuse me again. Excuse me, but that's the blessing of what you're saying, how to deal with those triggers, and that we have the power to be able to deal with those things, and we be able to tap in. So I just encourage the listeners that you really, really, really uh, take heed to Christina, and she's called the TikTok doc the
TikTok
TikTok
trauma. Yeah.
trauma doc. So
Yeah.
TikTok trauma doc. And I make sure that that's out there too, where they can get follow you on TikTok. The TikTok trauma doc, and you said you have a free, like a kind of like an assessment or a free checklist or something.
It's more like a file. So on TikTok, they have these little folders at the top of your
Okay.
profile. And so I created a file of healing skills. And so
Okay.
I'll teach people. I love how you just said the word tap, Millicent, because I'll teach people how to do tapping. So tapping is self acupressure. And it's just like acupuncture, but you just use your little fingertips and you're tapping on your body. And this is an evidence based way to help regulate your nervous system. And if you're feeling a big emotion, you don't want to get rid of it. Emotions are messages. You just don't want to feel it so intensely.
Right.
So, the way that I describe tapping is it's like a giant volume dial, and it just helps you turn down the volume. So, if you're feeling anger at like an 8, what if you could get the anger down to a 2, and then it wasn't kind of driving all of your behaviors? So,
Yes.
what I do is I help people manage intensity of emotional pain and physical pain, and that's all in the healing skills folder. It's also in the modern trauma toolkit, and I really want to get these skills into the hands of parents and teachers and everybody who's helping with kids or helping with people in the public, because a lot of people have so much stress and it's showing up and they
Yeah.
don't know what to do with it. So I want them to be able to use these skills, things like tapping, havening. Um, I showed you my little dog. We had a little talk
Yes.
about dogs. Um, when they get stressed out, they shake their little bodies from head to toe. And it turns out humans are supposed to shake our body too. And so I'll teach people how to tremor to release some of their muscle tension. And I mean, for some people, they're not going to do a tremor exercise. It's just not something they're interested in. So I'll say, okay, would you go for a run or a walk? Would you go dance? Would you take a yoga class or take a martial arts class? What can you do that moves your body? And you have to release the stored muscle tension, because your fight and flight system is your sympathetic nervous system, and that sends all of your energy to your heart and to your muscles. Well, if you've been sending all this energy for your muscles to your muscles for a long time, they're going to store that tension and they're going to feel pretty uncomfortable. And I think a lot of chronic pain is people who've been stuck in fight and flight.
Yes.
Um, so I mean, obviously there's injuries and other things that happen, but we don't recognize how much we need to move our body to release that tension, because our human bodies weren't designed to sit at an office desk for, 10
8
hours
hours.
and come home and sit on the couch. That's
Yes.
not what we were meant to do. We were meant to be moving.
Yeah. And so, and that's very, very important. And that's why you hear they say, well, what helps with, depression or anxiety, exercise. And that's because you're moving and you're getting things moving, you're getting your body moving. And then eventually things just kind of start to line up. I ain't talking about you got to go and be a bodybuilder, but just, like you said, just moving and just getting in tune, and, enjoying the process. It does make a difference. It does changes things. So that's very, very important. But everything that you have said today has been life changing, and I know that it has, just even the little bit of information that you have given has been profound, and it's been, so, it's been so valuable, to us. I know it's been valuable to me. And, and thank you for allowing me to share my story, because this is, your time, but, thank you for allowing me, or not, just, let me and have that, feel like I have the privilege to let you know what it was that I was experiencing. And thank you for the feedback that you gave me as well, because there's a lot of people who have lost loved ones, or a lot of people who have lost, just whatever jobs, and, just whatever the trauma brings. I don't want to, start to categorize, but whatever the trauma may bring, if you're listening, some of the things that, Dr. Christina has said to help us and to pour into us in a short period of time. Could you imagine, if we're, really listening to her on her platforms and her books, and, the things that she says, how, much of a difference it will make for us, when dealing with trauma and dealing with these things in our life, creating, like you said, a safe space, all of those things. So as far as your website, moderntrauma.com, is that your coaching program, or is that where you can get the book?
Yeah, moderntrauma.com is the book. And if you go to the website, it kind of gives you the vibes of the book. It's really soft and nurturing. It's not a book that's likely to trigger you, because a lot of books about trauma will do that. Um, inside the book, there's a QR code, so a little code to scan, and it takes you to a hidden page of the Modern Trauma site. And it actually has videos, it'll have audio practices, all of the illustrations in my book. There's like colored versions that you can download. So if you wanted to learn how to do tapping and then you're like, oh gosh, I can't remember, what are the 9 tapping points again? Well, you can just print it off and carry it with you in your wallet. So I wanted to make it really easy for people to kind of access all of these exercises. Um, so moderntrauma.com is the book. ChristineGibson.net is my website, mostly for speaking. I don't take on patients because I work
Oh, okay.
in the public system in Canada. So I work in addiction medicine and refugee health, and
Okay. Yeah.
I don't really take anyone on privately, but that's why I want to get the message out there is that there's so many different things that you can learn and connect to, and some of it you can do without formal therapy.
Yes. And that's the key, so there is hope for people who don't really want to go to therapy, can't go to therapy, don't desire to go to therapy, all the above.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing with us, and I want to make sure that this information gets out. I'm going to be sharing your websites and especially for the book, so when you get the book, and then like you said, that secret page, that scan code in the book, that secret spot where you can go and get a lot of these tips and these tools that you would need, and that's going to be very, very, very beneficial, on this journey through our trauma. And it's just amazing. Like I said before, this has been just it's been amazing, and it's also been um, it's been empowering and it's been awakening. If you don't really talk some things out, you really don't know what's really there, what you need to change, or what's bothering you, what's hindering you. And this was a safe place today for me, and I appreciate that. I really do appreciate this, and it was meant for us to, I know I had my little hiccup, before, but it was meant for us to get together today, so that those who need to hear and to be reached with this message will get this message. And I just pray that it's just as impactful for them as it's been for me. So, anything you want to share with us?
There's one last thing I wanted to mention is
Okay.
trauma isn't the thing that we go through. Trauma is our body's response to that thing. So we can all, like, let's say there was 50 people at the beach that day when you were younger, and some of them might have PTSD symptoms. They might have constant nightmares about whatever it is that they saw. They might have um, hypervigilance. They might be always looking over their shoulder, waiting for something bad to happen, and they might be always avoiding crowds. So those are symptoms of PTSD. But you might have somebody who was in the crowd on the beach and they don't have any of those residual symptoms. So the way that trauma hits us isn't the event, it's the way
Mm,
that our brain and body responds to the event. And it's totally normal. It's the way that our brain protects us. So if you're somebody who finds yourself avoiding certain situations or waiting for something bad to happen or constantly thinking about your past, that's your brain trying to protect you. But it also might be a symptom of trauma. So, we're built for this. We're built to protect ourselves in this way, and there's new paths that are possible if it's something that's causing you distress.
yeah. And so again, can you repeat that first part? I want to make sure we get it because I had it wrong, but I want to make sure we get it. Trauma is
Trauma isn't the event that happens, it's your body's response to the event.
that is very key, and that is really, really, really good. That's what I want to make sure that you said that again, because that is something that there it is, another, something else that we really didn't know. I didn't know, and maybe
Yeah.
I was saying it wrong. Maybe talking to others about it in the wrong manner. But that is so true. Like you said, everybody's not affected by the same incident. Some it might have, like you said, it might have been like, oh, that's just something that just happens. Others, like you said, then PTSD is a result of that. So let's really understand the definition of trauma, and that was
And what
very good. That was a
I work with is once you've been through trauma, you have the opportunity to get through post traumatic growth. So, the difference between resiliency and post traumatic growth is resiliency is when you get back to your baseline, and post traumatic growth is when you actually change. And that's when the transformation and the empowerment and the awareness comes in, is through that challenge that you've been through, is when transformation is possible. And people don't tend to transform without a challenge. So
yes.
this is the path to post traumatic growth. So I wanted to just say that I think you're walking that, Millicent, with your tea and your conversations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. It's been a blessing to do this, and to have this platform just for these moments like this. That's what I want to do. I want to, we need this. We need to hear the messages, We want those who have labored in those areas and have that information to pour into us. And I don't take it lightly. So I really appreciate you for saying that, and I really appreciate you for even giving me the opportunity to interview you today. And I
Oh,
really thank you for trusting that information with me to make sure that it gets out to the audiences and to the different countries, because it goes out everywhere. So I just pray that my prayer is always that the ears that need to hear, that the messages will reach them, and then I know that that's been my prayer, and I know because I believe that, I know that it'll come to pass.
well,
So I want, I'm sorry.
it's been an absolute pleasure.
Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I want to thank you again, and again, we can find the book on moderntrauma.com, and we can also find information about Dr. Christina on ChristinaGibson.net. So we want to thank you, and we want to make sure that we give you that credit of Dr. Christina, Doctor. And again,
It's my patient
congratulations.
can call me that. Even though I've got the double doctor, I don't even tend to use it. I
Right.
I don't take myself all that seriously, which if you follow me on TikTok, you'll probably realize. Um, Thanks again, Millicent. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I really appreciate the conversation.
Thank you so much. Bye.